Hi everyone, my name is Lydia Sloan. I'm 34 years old. My mom abandoned me as a child for not being gifted like my twin. And 17 years later, a man in a gray suit knocked on my apartment door holding my grandmother's sealed letter and said, "Mrs. Whitmore asked me to place this in your hands, not your sister's." For a second, I forgot how to breathe. It was a Tuesday. Rainy. The kind of late afternoon that makes the hallway outside your apartment smell like wet carpet and old paint. I had just come home from work, kicked off my shoes, and was standing in my kitchen eating crackers over the sink because I was too tired to make dinner when I heard the knock. 3 clean taps. Not a neighbor. Not a delivery. Too deliberate. When I opened the door, the man standing there looked like somebody who belonged in a law office lobby or beside a polished mahogany table. Mid-60s, silver hair, charcoal suit, leather folder tucked under one arm. "Calm face, careful eyes. Lydia Sloan?" he asked. "Yes." "My name is Arthur Bell. I was your grandmother Eleanor Whitmore's attorney." Was that word landed first, not because Grandma was dead. I already knew that. She had died 6 days earlier, and my sister Fiona had texted me 4 hours after the funeral was over. Grandma passed. Service was small. Mom thought it was better not to complicate things. Complicate things. That was the family phrase for my existence. Arthur lifted a thick cream envelope. My name was written across the front in my grandmother's handwriting. Not Fiona, not family, me. She left very specific instructions, he said. This was to be delivered only to you, by hand, and only after I confirmed your mother had made no effort to contact you properly. I actually laughed once, not because it was funny, because it was so exactly my grandmother to predict one last cruelty and plan around it. "My mother didn't contact me at all," I said. He gave one small nod, like that confirmed a line in a file. "Then your grandmother understood the situation clearly." That sentence almost broke me, because clarity was the one thing my mother had spent my whole childhood trying to beat out of me. Every time I noticed the difference between how Fiona and I were treated, my mother would say I was being sensitive, competitive, difficult, jealous of my own sister. But I was never confused. Not really. You can't grow up in a house like mine and be confused for long. Every report card in our house was a family trial. That's not a metaphor. It truly felt like court. Mom would sit at the dining room table with both report cards laid out in front of her like exhibits. Fiona's first. Mine second. Always second. Fiona was the gifted one. That word followed her everywhere like perfume. Gifted in math. Gifted in piano. Gifted in speech competitions, science fairs, spelling bees, debate, cello. Whatever shiny thing our school could put on a stage. My mother loved anything that came with applause. I was not a disaster. That was the strange part. I got decent grades, mostly B's, a few A's in English. I read constantly. I drew in the margins of my notebooks. Teachers described me as thoughtful, steady, kind. But in my mother's eyes, steady was just a slower word for disappointing. When Fiona brought home top marks, Mom would kiss her forehead, call Dad at work, plate extra dessert, and say things like, "This is what discipline looks like." Then she would turn to me, not scream. That would have been easier to explain. She would just look over my report card with that quiet, cool expression and say, "Try not to embarrass us next term." That was worse, because it taught me early that humiliation doesn't always arrive loud. Sometimes it comes in a calm voice across meatloaf and mashed potatoes while your twin sister gets another slice of pie. Dad usually stayed quiet. If Mom was the judge, he was the furniture, present, useful to the room, not built to intervene. And Fiona? She learned fast what love looked like in that house. Praise for performance, warmth for winning. So she kept winning. I don't even blame her for that part. Children shape themselves around whatever keeps the door open. What I blame her for came later. The year we turned 17, Fiona won a statewide academic award. Mom cried in the auditorium. Real tears. Proud tears. She took about 200 photos, ordered a sheet cake, and turned our living room into a shrine of certificates, trophies, and framed newspaper clippings. 2 weeks later, I got into a small summer arts program in another city. It was the first time anything had felt fully mine. I was standing in the kitchen with the acceptance email open on my phone when I showed Mom, waiting, stupidly, hopefully, for one good moment. She barely glanced at the screen. "That's nice," she said. "But let's not distract from your sister's momentum." Momentum. That was another family word. Fiona had it. I interrupted it. 3 months after that, Mom left. Not in the dramatic way people picture. No midnight fight. No smashed plates. No suitcases dragged through tears. She told us at breakfast that she and Dad were taking space, but by noon she had packed half the master bedroom and all of Fiona's important things, her medals, her school awards, her baby albums, her framed photos, her keepsake boxes. I remember standing in the hallway, watching her carry armfuls of Fiona's life to the car. I said, "What about my things?" Mom didn't even stop folding. She looked at me and said, "You're old enough not to need this kind of sentiment." Then she left every picture of me behind. Every single one. School portraits. Dance recital snapshots. Candids with Grandma in the garden. The photo of me at 8 missing my front teeth. A Christmas picture where I'm laughing so hard my head is tipped back. All of them stayed in the house like proof of something she was relieved not to pack. And the worst part? She took Fiona with her, not full custody, not legally, just practically, emotionally, socially. She built a new life around the child she thought reflected well on her, and left me with Dad, his silences, and a house full of empty frames where the message had already been delivered. You were never the one she meant to keep. Arthur was still standing outside my apartment door when I realized I had gone quiet too long. "Mrs. Sloane?" he asked gently. I stepped aside. "Sorry, please come in." He entered carefully, like a man used to walking into rooms where grief had already been sitting for hours. He didn't comment on my tiny apartment, or the stack of library books on the coffee table, or the cracked mug by the sink. He simply placed the leather folder on the table and set the envelope in front of me. "Your grandmother also asked me to tell you something," he said. My hands froze over the seal. "What?" Arthur looked directly at me. She said, "Tell Lydia I knew exactly why her mother left with only one daughter's photographs." I stared at him, then at the envelope, and for the first time in 17 years, I felt the old story inside my family begin to shift. Not because my mother was finally ready to tell the truth, but because my grandmother had apparently written it down before anyone could bury it. Arthur did not tell me to open the letter right away. That was how I knew he had done this before. Not this exact situation, maybe, but rooms where a person receives proof that their whole childhood had not been imagined. He sat across from me at my small kitchen table, placed both hands on the leather folder and said, "Your grandmother was very careful about timing." I looked at the sealed envelope. She was careful about everything. "Yes," he said, "especially after your mother left." My fingers tightened around the edge of the table. People always said after your mother left like it was one event. One departure, one suitcase, one wound. It wasn't. My mother left in pieces before she ever moved out. She left every time Fiona got introduced as my gifted daughter, and I got introduced as her twin. She left every time a teacher said I had talent in writing, and Mom answered, "Yes, but Fiona is the academic one." She left every time she corrected my posture at Fiona's award ceremonies because this is her moment. Don't look miserable. By the time she packed the car, the leaving had already been rehearsed for years. Arthur opened the folder and removed a single photograph. Stomach dropped before he even turned it around. It was from the day Mom left. I had never seen that photo before. In it, our old driveway was full of boxes. Fiona was standing beside Mom's car, holding a stack of framed certificates against her chest. Mom had one arm around her shoulders. Both of them were smiling, not broadly, not joyfully. but with that tight expression people wear when they know they are doing something cruel and want history to call it brave. And in the background, through the open front door, I was visible. 17 years old. Barefoot. Standing in the hallway. Holding one of my own school portraits in both hands. I stared at the photo until the room blurred. "Who took this?" "Your grandmother," Arthur said. I looked up. "She was there?" "She arrived earlier than your mother expected." That answer changed something inside me, because my mother had always told the story differently. She said Grandma was dramatic afterward, that she took my side because she disliked Fiona's ambition, that she misunderstood the move, that she had not seen the whole situation, but Grandma had seen the driveway, the boxes, the car. Arthur slid the photograph closer. She wrote a note on the back. I turned it over with careful hands. Grandma's handwriting covered the white space in blue ink. Sharon packed every award. Fiona ever won and left every photograph of Lydia in the hallway. I asked her why. She said, "Lydia will be fine." This is the sentence people use before they abandon the child they have decided is easier to wound. I pressed the photo flat with my palm. For years, the worst part of that day had been thinking maybe I was exaggerating it. Maybe Mom was overwhelmed. Maybe custody logistics were complicated. Maybe she thought I wanted to stay with Dad. Maybe she forgot the pictures. Maybe. The mind will invent 1,000 soft explanations when the hard one is too sharp to hold. Grandma had written the hard one down. Arthur said, "There is more." I almost laughed. Of course there was. Families like mine don't create one wound. They create systems, patterns, little ceremonies of preference repeated until everybody forgets they were choices. He opened the folder wider. Inside were copies of old report cards. Mine and Fiona's side by side. Some had sticky notes attached in Grandma's handwriting. Fiona, praised publicly. Lydia, corrected privately. Same semester. Lydia's grades acceptable. Reaction disproportionate. Another page had a copy of a birthday card, my 13th birthday. I remembered it instantly, because Mom had bought Fiona a keyboard that year for advanced music practice and told me my gift was delayed because the keyboard was expensive. The card from Grandma contained $100. I never saw that money. Again, Arthur placed a bank withdrawal slip beside it. Your grandmother began keeping records when you were 12, he said. Not because of money at first. Because of the pattern. What pattern? He did not soften his voice. Your mother taking resources intended for you and redirecting them toward Fiona, then calling your disappointment jealousy. I sat back. That sentence was so accurate it felt like being touched on a bruise I had forgotten to protect. I remembered Fiona's science camp. The one Mom said we could only afford because I didn't really need the art supplies Grandma had offered to buy me. I remembered my winter coat being called fine for one more year while Fiona got a tailored blazer for a scholarship interview. I remembered Mom telling relatives I was low maintenance, as if neglect became a compliment when said warmly enough. Arthur took out one more envelope. Not sealed. This was not for you to keep, he said. Only to read. I opened it. It was a letter from Grandma to Arthur, dated 2 months after Mom left. Arthur, if Sharon ever tries to frame Lydia's abandonment as Lydia's choice, do not let her. Lydia did not choose to be left. Lydia was selected for leaving because she made Sharon feel ordinary. Fiona's giftedness feeds Sharon's vanity. Lydia's steadiness threatens it. I stopped. Reading, my chest hurt, not because Grandma had insulted my mother, because she had named the thing I had never been allowed to say. Mom didn't. Just prefer Fiona because Fiona was gifted. Mom preferred Fiona because Fiona made her feel like the mother of someone exceptional. I made her feel responsible. Arthur waited. I forced myself to keep reading. Sharon will say Lydia is resilient. Watch that word. In families like this, resilient often means the child we hurt because she keeps surviving it. I put the letter down. There are some truths you wait your whole life to hear. And when they finally arrive, they do not feel like victory. They feel like grief with a witness. Arthur gave me a minute. Then he said, "Your grandmother intended for you to receive more than this letter. There is a reading tomorrow morning." I looked at him. "A will reading?" "Yes, your mother and sister will be there." My whole body went cold. Fiona. I had not seen her in almost 5 years. Not in person. I saw pieces of her online sometimes. Conference photos. Award posts. My mother commenting with rows of hearts. People still called her brilliant, exceptional, the kind of woman who was born to shine. I wondered if anyone ever asked what it cost to keep her lit. "My mother won't want me there," I said. Arthur's expression barely changed. "Your grandmother anticipated that. Of course she did." He took a final document from the folder and placed it in front of me. At the top were typed words. "Attendance requirement. Lydia Sloan must be present." Below that, Grandma's signature. Arthur tapped the page once. She was very specific. "If your mother objects, I am to pause the reading until you are seated." My throat tightened. Seated. Such a simple word. But in my family, being seated meant something. It meant you were part of the room before the work began. It meant you were not standing at the edge, waiting to be useful. It meant no one had the right to move you into the hallway. I looked back at the photo from the driveway. At 17-year-old me, holding my own forgotten picture. Then I looked at the sealed envelope with my name on it. "What does Grandma's letter say?" Arthur folded his hands. "That one," he said, "is for tomorrow." I stared at him. He nodded toward the photograph. "She wanted you to remember what was left behind before you heard what she protected." And that was when I understood something that made my hands go still. Grandma had not only watched my mother abandon me, she had built tomorrow around proving it. The reading was held in a conference room that smelled like polished wood, printer paper, and raincoats drying too close together. I arrived 14 minutes early. That was a habit I never lost. Children raised as disappointments learn to be early. Quiet, prepared, and still somehow wrong. Arthur's receptionist led me into the room and pointed to a chair near the middle of the table. Not the corner, not the wall, the middle. My name was printed on a place card in black. Ink, Lydia Sloan. I stood there looking at it longer than a person should look at. Church, then Arthur came in behind me and said, "Your grandmother chose the seating." I swallowed. Of course she did. I sat down before anyone else arrived. That mattered. For once, I was not entering a room after the story had already been arranged without me. My father came first. He looked older than I remembered, thinner through the shoulders, wearing the embarrassed politeness of a man who had spent 17 years confusing silence with peace. He paused when he saw me, and for 1 second I thought he might say something fatherly. He said, "Lydia." Just my name, like it was a piece of furniture he recognized from storage. "Dad." He sat 2 chairs away. Then came Fiona. She looked exactly like her pictures, which made her feel less real. Sleek coat, expensive bag, hair pulled back smoothly. The kind of face that had been praised so long it had learned to expect good lighting from every room. She stopped at the door when she saw me. "Oh," she said. "You came." Not hello, not "I'm sorry about Grandma." You came, as if I had wandered into her invitation. Before I could answer, my mother walked in behind her. Sharon Sloan had not changed in the ways I wanted her to. Still elegant, still composed, still able to make a room feel like it was being graded. She wore cream because of course she did. My mother loved colors that made her look soft. Her eyes landed on me, then on the place card, then back on me. "What is this?" she asked. Arthur entered before I could decide whether to answer. "This," he said, "is your mother's will reading." Mom's mouth tightened. "I mean, why is Lydia seated there?" There it was, not "why is my daughter here?" Why is she seated there? Arthur placed his leather folder at the head of the table. "Because Eleanor instructed it." Mom gave a short laugh. Arthur, surely we don't need theatrics. No, he said. We need compliance. Fiona lowered herself into the chair beside Mom, already looking irritated in that delicate way she had perfected as a teenager, never ugly enough to be blamed, never silent enough to be neutral. Dad stared at the table. Arthur opened the folder. Before we begin formal distribution, Mrs. Whitmore required that a personal statement be read aloud. Mom sighed. Mother was very emotional toward the end. Arthur looked at her over his glasses. This statement was written 4 years ago. The room changed. Small shift. Big meaning. 4 years ago meant before hospice, before the funeral, before anyone could blame medication, confusion, grief, or deathbed drama. Arthur removed the sealed envelope. My name was on it. Fiona looked at it and frowned. Why does she get a letter? Arthur did not answer her. He broke the seal. My hands folded together in my lap so tightly my fingers hurt. Arthur began. If this letter is being read in the conference room, then Lydia is present, seated and visible. Good. I looked down fast, because that one word, visible, hit harder than I expected. Arthur continued. Sharon, if you have already objected to her chair, I would like you to ask yourself why your first instinct, even now, was not grief, but placement. My mother's face flushed. Fiona glanced at her. Dad closed his eyes. Arthur read on. I have spent years watching this family pretend that giftedness was love, when in truth it became a language you used to excuse neglect. Fiona was not wrong for being talented. A child cannot be blamed for shining. But Sharon, you used one daughter's light as an excuse to keep the other in shadow. Mom's voice came sharp. That is cruel. Arthur paused. Do you want me to stop? She looked at Fiona. Fiona whispered, Mom. But Mom said nothing. Arthur continued. Every report card became a comparison. Every birthday became a scale. Every ordinary achievement of Lydia's was held up beside Fiona's trophies until Lydia learned to apologize for being steady instead of spectacular. I stared at the table. The place card blurred, because Grandma had not written accusation like a stranger. She had written memory, specific memory, I remember. Lydia at 12 bringing me a short story she had written about a girl who lived inside a clock. Sharon dismissed it because Fiona had just advanced to the state mathematics final. I remember Lydia's face. Not angry, not jealous, smaller. That is what repeated comparison does to a child. It does not always make her bitter. Sometimes it teaches her to shrink politely. Fiona shifted in her chair. For the first time, she looked uncomfortable. Not sorry yet. Just uncomfortable. That was something. Arthur turned the page. I also remember the day Sharon left. Let no one in this room call it a clean separation or a practical custody arrangement. Sharon packed Fiona's medals, awards, photo albums, certificates, and keepsakes. She left every photograph of Lydia in the hallway. I know because I was there. I took a picture so that if memory ever softened the truth, paper would not. Mom's head snapped up. You photographed us? Arthur reached into the folder and placed the driveway photograph in the center of the table. Nobody touched it. Nobody needed to. The image did what images do when words have been dodged too long. Fiona leaned forward first. Her face changed when she saw herself. 17, smiling beside Mom's car, arms full of awards. Then her eyes moved to the background. To me. Barefoot in the doorway, holding my own school picture. Fiona whispered, I didn't know you were standing there. I looked at her. You didn't look. That was not an insult. It was a diagnosis. Mom pushed the photo back like it had burned her. This is manipulative. Arthur's voice stayed flat. It is a photograph. That day was complicated. Grandma had predicted that too. Arthur read the next line. If Sharon says the day was complicated, tell her abandonment often is. That does not make it less deliberate. Mom went still. Dad looked at her then. Really looked. Maybe for the first time in years. He was seeing not the woman who left him, but the woman who selected which child was worth carrying into her new life. Arthur continued. Lydia, if you are hearing this, I want you to understand something before numbers. Property or inheritance enter the room. You are not left because you lacked gifts. You are left because your gifts did not decorate your mother's pride in a way she could display. My chest tightened so sharply I almost stood up, but I didn't. I stayed seated. That felt like a rebellion. Fiona's eyes were wet now, but I did not trust tears that had not yet chosen a side. Arthur placed another document beside the photo. It was a list. My childhood art supplies, redirected to Fiona's academic travel, my birthday money used for Fiona's enrichment fees, my summer program deposit never paid, despite Grandma giving Mom the funds. Each line had a date. Each date had a note. Mom whispered, Mother had no right to keep records like this. Thur looked at her. Your mother had every right to keep records of money she gave and instructions attached to it. Fiona turned toward Mom. What summer program? Mom's mouth tightened. I answered because I wanted her to hear it from me. The arts program in Portland. I got in when we were 17. Grandma paid the deposit. Mom told me the program lost my paperwork. Fiona stared at her. Mom? My mother's face hardened. You were preparing for the national scholarship interview. We had to prioritize there. It was not denial, just priority. A clean little word for theft when the thief still feels justified. Fiona sat back as if the chair had shifted under her. Arthur removed one final page from the envelope. There is one more section. Before the will, Mom's voice was low. Enough! Arthur ignored her. Grandma's words filled the room again. Sharon will say she prioritized Fiona because Fiona had promise. But a mother who only loves promise does not love children. She loves return on investment. That line landed like a slap. Mom stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. This is obscene. Arthur looked up. If you leave, the reading continues. She froze. Because that was the problem with people like my mother. They could abandon a room easily when they controlled what happened after. But this time, if she left, she lost the story. She sat back down. Arthur folded Grandma's letter and placed it in front of me. Then he opened the will. And before he read a single distribution, he said something that made Fiona stop. Crying and my mother stopped breathing. Mrs. Whitmore also instructed me to retrieve the cedar memory box from the secure storage cabinet before discussing the trust. Fiona wiped her cheek. What trust? Arthur did not look at her. He looked at me. The one your grandmother created for the daughter your mother left behind. Arthur stood and unlocked a tall cabinet behind his desk. No one spoke while he did it. That was the strange thing about evidence. Before it appears, everyone argues. After it appears, people listen to drawers opening. He removed a cedar box with brass corners and placed it on the conference table. It was old, polished smooth, the kind of box that looked like it had spent decades, holding things people were not ready to admit mattered. My mother stared at it. Fiona stared at my mother. I stared at Grandma's handwriting on the small paper tag tied to the latch for Lydia. The child left. Behind. The room tilted slightly, not enough to make me fall. Just enough to remind me that standing had always been easier than being seen. Arthur opened the box. Inside were photographs, not random ones. Mine.school portraits, birthday pictures, a drawing I made at 11. A folded program from the arts showcase where I won honorable mention, and Mom left early because Fiona had practice. A short story printed on yellowing paper with Grandma's note in the margin. She makes quiet things feel alive. I covered my mouth. My mother whispered, Where did she get those? Arthur answered without looking at her. You left them behind. That was it. 4 words. No drama, no shouting. Just the truth placed on the table like an object with weight. Fiona picked up a photo of me at 8, missing my front teeth, holding a ribbon from a school writing contest. I've never seen this, she said. I looked at her. Why would you have? She flinched. Arthur removed an envelope from the bottom of the box. Your grandmother collected what was discarded. She also documented what happened to the funds she gave for Lydia. Mom's face tightened again. Arthur, I was a single mother, trying to manage two daughters with different needs. Dad finally spoke. You didn't manage to. Daughters, the room went still, Mom. Turned toward him like she had forgotten he was capable of sound. He looked at the cedar box, not at her. You chose one and told the other she was fine. For 17 years, my father had been furniture. Then, suddenly, a chair moved. Mom's eyes flashed. Don't you dare pretend you protected her. I didn't, he said. That was the first honest thing I had heard him say all day. He looked at me then, and his face carried something worse than guilt. Accuracy. I didn't protect you, he said quietly. I was so angry she left that I let you become proof I had been wrong too. I kept the house, but I didn't make it a home for you. I did not forgive him. Not there. Not like that. But the truth had entered the room from a place I never expected, and even my mother had no clean way to push it back out. Arthur opened the will. The trust was established by Eleanor Whitmore 12 years ago, he said. It was funded gradually, with records attached showing deposits originally intended for Lydia's education, creative development, and personal use. Fiona looked sick. How much? Arthur turned a page. Enough. Mom leaned forward. Enough for what? For what Sharon took from her, Arthur said. My mother laughed once, sharp and ugly. This is punishment. Arthur looked at Grandma's letter beside the cedar box. No, he said. Your mother called it correction. Then he read the distribution. The trust, including investment growth, went entirely to me. Grandma's house would be sold, and my portion would be placed into the trust as well. Fiona received a separate modest sum, clearly labeled by Grandma as a gift, not a crown. My mother received $1 and Grandma's written explanation, Arthur. Read that part slowly. I leave Sharon $1 because she has already taken from Lydia everything I would have. Trusted her to hold. My mother went pale, Fiona started. Crying openly now, not the polished kind. Not pretty tears. Real ones. Confused ones. Late ones. Mom, she whispered. You used Lydia's summer money for me? Mom looked at her. I did what I had to do. For me? For your future? Fiona shook her head. And what about hers? My mother's mouth opened. Nothing came out. That was the first time I had ever seen her without a sentence ready. Arthur placed one final sheet in the center of the table. Copy of a letter Grandma had written to Fiona. He asked if she wanted it read. Aloud, Fiona nodded. Arthur read. Fiona, you were a child when the pattern began. You are not guilty for being praised. But you became responsible the day you started enjoying the fact that your sister disappeared. Whenever you entered a room, Fiona sobbed once. I looked away because some part of me had wanted that sentence to hurt her, and when it didn't feel as satisfying as I imagined. It felt sadder. Grandma's letter continued. If you want to be truly gifted, learn to tell the truth when the lie benefits you. Arthur folded the page. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then my mother stood again, slower this time. She looked at me like she was seeing not a daughter, but a bill she never expected to come due. You always resented her, she said. There it was. The old accusation, the final door she knew how to open. But this time, I did not step through it. No, I said. I missed you. That silenced her more completely than anger would have. I pushed the driveway photo toward her. I missed you while you were standing right in front of me. That was the part I never knew how to explain. Her face changed, just for a second. Not enough for repair. Enough for recognition. Arthur closed the will and said the trust. Paperwork would require my signature before any transfer. He also said my mother would receive copies of the record only through formal request. Not through me, that mattered. For once, I was not the messenger of my own damage. Fiona stood at the end of the table, holding the letter Grandma had written to her. She looked smaller than she had when she walked in. Lydia, she said. I didn't know all of it. I looked at the cedar box, at my photographs, at the version of me Grandma had preserved when my mother packed around me like I was not worth carrying. I believe you, I said. Fiona inhaled like relief was coming. Then I finished. But you knew enough. Her face crumpled. My mother walked out first. No speech. No apology. No dramatic exit. Just the sound of the conference room door opening and closing behind the woman who had spent my childhood choosing which parts of me were convenient to forget. Dad stayed seated. Fiona stayed crying. Arthur gathered the papers, and I sat there with Grandma's cedar box in front of me, realizing the inheritance had already begun before anyone transferred $1. It began the moment I did not follow my mother into the hallway. For the first week after the reading, my mother did not contact me. That was new. Usually, silence from her had shape. It was punishment. A room I was supposed to walk into first, apologizing for making her uncomfortable, but this silence felt different. It felt like someone who had finally run out of clean words. Fiona texted me 3 days later, "I'm sorry." I stared at those 2 words for a long time. Not because they were enough, because for most of my life, I had not even been given that much. I did not answer right away. I went to work, came home, made tea, opened the cedar box again and laid the photographs across my kitchen table. There I was at 6, holding a crayon drawing. At 8, missing my front teeth. At 12, standing beside Grandma with a book pressed to my chest. At 17, barefoot in the doorway with my own forgotten school portrait in my hands. I looked at that girl for a long time. Then I typed Fiona back. I believe you're sorry. I also need you to understand that sorry does not make us sisters again overnight, she answered almost immediately. I know. That was the first time Fiona did not try to win the emotional room. No defense. No explanation. No, but Mom. No, you have to understand. Just 2 words that did not ask me to comfort her. I kept the message, not as proof of healings. Proof that something had finally stopped performing. My father came by the next Sunday. He called first. Asked if he could drop something off. I almost said no, but Arthur had sent me a box of Grandma's remaining papers. And inside was a note addressed to him that I had not opened, so I let him come. He stood outside my apartment holding an old cardboard photo album with cracked plastic over the front. I should have given this to you years ago, he said. I did not invite him in. That might sound cold, but it was not. It was the first boundary I ever gave myself without shaking. He handed me the album. Inside were pictures from the years after Mom left. Not many. Dad had never been good at taking photos. But there were some. Me at 18, repainting my bedroom. Me at 19, holding a grocery bag in the kitchen. Me at 20, asleep on the couch with a book open on my chest. Ordinary photos, unpolished, unchosen. For years, I thought no one had been watching me at all. Dad cleared his throat. Your grandmother called me a coward once. I looked at him. She was right, he said. That was not an apology, but it was the first brick of one. I don't know what to do with that, I said. He nodded. You don't have to do anything with it. Then he left. That mattered too. For once, a parent brought me pain and did not ask me to carry it back for them. The trust settled over the next few months. Arthur handled everything. He was careful, plain-spoken, and almost aggressively boring about paperwork, which I came to appreciate. After a lifetime of emotional storms, boring professionalism felt like a luxury. The money was more than I expected. Not millions. Not the kind of number that turns life into a movie. But enough to pay off my student loans, move out of my cramped apartment, and finally rent a small studio space where I could write and teach art. Workshops on weekends, that was what I used part of it for. Not because I had become some hidden genius after all, because Grandma had saved the part of me my mother dismissed as inconvenient, and I wanted to give it air. The first workshop had 6 students, 4 adults, 2 teenagers. We painted still life objects under soft lamps, pears, chipped cups, a brass key, one small wooden box. At the end, a shy girl with paint on her sleeve came up to me and said, "I'm not really talented. I just like it." I almost cried. Instead, I smiled and said, "Liking it is a good enough reason to begin." I think Grandma would have liked that. Fiona came to the third workshop. She sat in the back, quiet, hair tied up, no perfect coat, no polished performance. She painted a terrible blue bowl and laughed at herself when it came out crooked. Afterward, she helped stack chairs. I watched her do it. Such a small thing, such a late thing. But in families like ours, repair does not arrive as one grand speech. Sometimes it arrives as the golden child finally picking up a chair no one asked you to carry. We were not close after that, not instantly. But we began speaking like 2 adults standing outside the old house, not 2 children trapped inside it. My mother did not come. She sent one letter 6 months later. It was 4 pages long and still somehow avoided the center. She wrote that she had been young, overwhelmed, frightened by divorce, proud of Fiona, worried about my quietness, and unsure how to reach me. I read it once, then I put it in a drawer. Not because it was worthless, because it was incomplete. The apology I needed would have said, "I chose wrong. I left you. I used your sister's shine to excuse my failure to love you properly." She had not written that. Maybe one day she would. Maybe she would not. I stopped, organizing my piece around the possibility. The cedar box sits on a shelf in my living room now, not hidden, not dramatic, just there. Sometimes I open it and look at the photo from the driveway, the one Grandma took. My mother and Fiona by the packed car. Me in the background, barefoot, holding my own picture. For a long time, that photo felt like evidence of abandonment. Now it feels like something else. Evidence that I was there, that I had a face, that someone saw the exact moment my mother tried to leave my story behind and decided to preserve it anyway. Grandma did not give me back my childhood. No letter could do that. No trust could do that. No lawyer in a gray suit could walk into 17 years of absence and make it smaller. But she gave me something I did not know I was allowed to have. A version of the truth that did not require my mother's agreement, and that changed everything. The last time I visited Grandma's grave, I brought one of my old school portraits from the cedar box. Not to leave it there, just to show her. I sat in the grass and told her about the studio, the students, Fiona's terrible blue bowl, Dad's awkward photo album, and the letter from Mom that still could not find its own courage. Then I held up the picture of 8-year-old me, smiling with missing teeth. "She made it," I whispered. The wind moved through the trees. For once, I did not imagine my mother's voice correcting me. I imagined Grandma's. Of course she did. And for the first time in my life, being ordinary did not feel like failure. It felt like freedom. Thank you for being here. If you were in Lydia's place, would you have accepted Fiona's apology? Or would the years of being left behind have been too much to forgive? And if your mother abandoned you because your sister made her look better, would you ever give her another chance to explain? Tell me in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'd love to see you in the next one.